Good evening, Vegas fans. IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. It's another episode, the 54th episode of Sin City Sports. You guys know how we do. We're here every Tuesday evening, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we talk all things Vegas sports, and there's nothing hotter right now than the Vegas Golden Knights. Let's be real. The Vegas Golden Knights are in pursuit of their first Stanley Cup championship, and it just feels like, and I think the consensus out there is like, dude, this team might be able to do it. And they're exciting. They're fun to watch, man. They put up a ton of goals, and when they're hot, I don't know if they're beatable. I really don't know if they're beatable. A lot of things going on in the NHL. We could have a Pacific Division Western Conference Final, which we can talk about a little bit into the show. We're going to talk about the Raiders because PFF was not a fan of the Raiders draft. And we're going to touch base on a few of the experts on the Raiders draft grade. Again, I gave them a B- last week. You guys heard it here first, right? B-. The grades up and down from what the experts think. And PFF is one of the most notable experts, and they just weren't very happy with the grade. And they kind of said some notes. I can't wait to talk about them tonight. But when we get back here on IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show presented by IE Sports Radio, can't wait to get started. Welcome back to IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'm your host, Cale Henderson. We're back at it again every Tuesday evening, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We talk all things Vegas sports. A lot to talk about today. You guys can get at us on our Twitter forums, at Sin City _, at Sin City _IESR. You can get at my personal Twitter, at Cale _Henderson. Chime in. We'll talk about anything sports related, but especially in Vegas. We focus that on the Vegas sports feed or the Twitter page, but on my page, it's whatever, man, because it's my page. We can talk about food. We can talk about sports. We can talk about movies. Speaking of which, I went and saw the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Fantastic movie. Marvel has been an absolute dud lately. This movie is phenomenal, and I put it in the top 5, if not top 3 Marvel movies I've ever watched. If you guys get a chance, not that I necessarily want to promote them, but we're all about having a good time. Check it out. It was a lot of fun. A lot of things going on in Vegas, right? One of my favorites right now would be the Golden Knights. I don't think there's a hotter team. They're trending upward in all the right directions, and everywhere in IE Sports Radio, I can tell you, the IE Sports Radio fam, you can tell that they're kind of leaning towards, there's a possibility the Golden Knights win it this year. I think their biggest threat was the Avalanche, and they got knocked out early. I think their second biggest threat was the Bruins. They got knocked out early. Not to say that there aren't really good NHL teams left. There are. The Oilers are no slouch. They're only down a game, and the Oilers aren't just going to go away quietly, all right? Probably the most talented player in all of hockey right now is Connor McDavid. Connor McDavid is on the Oilers. In the game that the Oilers won, and they won handily, Golden Knights couldn't stop Connor McDavid. In the 2 games that the Golden Knights have won, they've done a great job of stopping Connor McDavid, keeping Leon Draisaitl off of the scoreboard. And that's made a huge difference for the Vegas Golden Knights. But I think their relentless attack, I think their transition, they play really well transitioning with the puck, better than most teams in the league. And we've talked about this for months. The Golden Knights were an excellent team last year. The issue they had was injuries. All of their main stars, the Mark Stones, the Jack Eichels, their goalie, I think it's Brossoit, you know, let's see, go down the list. I know John Marshall, William Carlson, a lot of guys missed a ton of time last year. And there's not much you can do when your better players aren't available to play hockey games. They've been available this year, and what'd they do? First in the Pacific, probably the toughest division in hockey right now. I mean, it's kind of hard to argue against that. Um, Imagine you're in the playoffs and you have to play against the Golden Knights, the number one team in the Pacific and the number one team in the West. Imagine you're in the playoffs and you have to play against the Oilers. You have the future legend Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, which are potent, um, unbelievable tandem, and super talented. Then you look at the Kings. Kings are an up and coming team, very talented again. Um, and then now Seattle, which I don't care what anybody says, the NHL is far and away the best league when it comes to their expansion and the way they treat their expansion teams, because the last two expansion teams have been very successful very early. And Seattle's knocking on the door of putting a really good Dallas Stars team, who I think would be an absolute nightmare in the Western Conference Finals against the Golden Knights, because the Golden Knights just didn't fare well against the Stars this year. I think it was one of the only teams they had a losing record against in the regular season. But the NHL does an excellent job with what they're doing with the expansion teams. Seattle has the ability to go up 3-1 against the Dallas Stars team. There's a possibility we see a Seattle Kraken. What a badass name, by the way. Seattle Kraken and a Las Vegas Golden Knights Western Conference Final. The representative of the NHL Stanley Cup Final could very well be out of the Pacific Division, and that's so epic, man. That just tells you how far the Pacific Division's come. But yeah, NHL is on fire. There's some games underway today. They're not necessarily part of, Adam Karnick covers that there on the Neutral Zone. Make sure you guys tune into him. But hey, just want to say hello to some of the folks in the chat. Taryn, you're awesome, man. Thank you. You're always a great teammate. Larry, go Golden Knights. Win this thing. I agree, man. This is the year. It really feels like the year. If it doesn't happen this year, I don't know what to tell you. Jack Eichel's playing out of his mind. Jonathan Marchessault, he's absolutely killing it. He had 2 goals the other night alone, and they were pretty quick. I mean, they were one after the other. I mean, it was pretty quick. I think he had the first 2 goals to be exact. Eichel did a great job on a shorthanded goal off a loose puck, and that had to do with, they just had a really great, again, transition hockey, right? Taking a puck, creating breakaways, creating numbers. Golden Knights do a great job of doing that. I think Golden Knights have more goals. It wouldn't surprise me if they have more goals in transition on a 2v1 or a 3v2 than any team in the league this year. And that's how you do. That's the point of hockey, man. You just fast-paced transition hockey. And that's what we saw the other day or yesterday against the Oilers. It's in all the highlights, man. And that place is rocking right now. Okay, Oilers aren't rocking. You could tell some Oilers are pretty sour because you had some Vegas Golden Knights fans standing up in the stands going, ha ha ha, like just bragging, man. You see Oilers fans like, we'll never win another championship. Just kidding. This series is far from being done, by the way. Far from being done. I'm telling you, the Oilers make me nervous. They're so talented. Their biggest weakness is their goalie. And I hope that continues to be the biggest weakness. But the reality is, that's a really talented team. And I think that this game 4 coming up is absolutely crucial. I think this game 4 in Edmonton tomorrow night is, if Golden Knights win that, I mean it's almost a lock. I just don't see the Oilers coming back with their goalie issues and how well the Golden Knights have been playing. Plus, the Golden Knights have a ton of experience in playing the Western Conference Finals. They've done it twice in the 5 years that they've been a team. Sorry, 6 years they've been a team. They've been a representative of the Stanley Cup Final twice in the 6 years they've been a team. This could be their 3rd time. I think they're primed to do it, man. The Golden Knights are in great position, and honestly, it feels like their roster just gets better and better each year, with the exception of maybe their goalie position. I don't think their goalie position is anywhere near as good as it was when the Flower was there. But listen, homie's a legend. He's going to be an NHL Hall of Famer for sure. But Brossoit and I think Jonathan Quick and the other young goalie that subs in on a consistent basis, I think they've been doing a great job, even against a really good, high-scoring Oilers team. They've done a great job of keeping goals off the board. Reality. I think Vegas has. I think tomorrow's a must win. I'm saying it here right now. I think it's a must win. If the Golden Knights let the Oilers back in, we'll probably see a game seven. I like a game seven in Vegas because it's Vegas, but I don't like a game seven because I feel like the longer you allow a really, really talented player like Connor McDavid to stay in this, look, man, in all of sports, you win the Jimmies and Joes, man. It's about the Jimmies and Joes. Okay? If those guys come to play and if you have a better team or a more talented team, you're usually going to win games, especially in pro sports, right? The Golden Knights have been one of those teams. They've been one of the most talented teams in the NHL. Collectively, yes, they can beat Connor McDavid. They're showing that. Can they keep it up? Can they keep it up for two more games? That's what Vegas fans are asking for right now. Get to the Western Conference Finals, host the Western Conference in general, like you've been doing majority of these playoffs. Just give yourselves an advantage, so that way you have the ability to possibly represent the Western Conference for the third time in 6 years in the Stanley Cup Final. And this could be the third time as a charm because the first two times they didn't win, right? They lost to the what was it? The Lightning. I believe they lost to the Lightning, and I believe they lost to the Washington Capitals. Ovi's first win. Couldn't be mad at either one of those because those teams were absolute juggernauts, right? Yeah. So Vegas, excellent team. They're playing really well, and they just got to keep it up. They have to keep it up. The NHL is crazy, man. The expansion, and just to give you guys a bit of a lowdown, this is just the gist of it. I'm sure there's a hell of a lot more that goes into it, but the gist of it is this. The NHL is doing it right. It is so hard for other pro sports teams that have an expansion team to be successful early. The NHL's method is absolutely working, man. Before I get into that total thing, I'm going to make sure we give a shout out. Adam Karnick, good evening, Kale. Some fun conversation brought up in the neutral zone. Aiden Hill over Jonathan Quick for Game 4. Thoughts? I don't know, man. That's tough. Jonathan Quick is not the same guy he used to be, but he's got so much experience in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's tough. It's tough. I would definitely go with the young guy. If Brossoit can't play, I would definitely go with the young guy, Aiden Hill. But Jonathan Quick, you can't argue with his experience. You can't argue with what he brings to the table. He's a Stanley Cup champion at goalie, and he'll probably be a Hall of Famer when it's all said and done because of what he did for the Kings. The fact that he's even a backup for the Golden Knights is such a luxury in today's hockey. That was a great trade, by the way. That was the way that the Golden Knights finagled that was fantastic because you damn well know the Kings were not trying to trade their legendary goalie Jonathan Quick to a rival team that was the top of the division at the time, and at the time the LA Kings had an opportunity to take over the first place in the Pacific. So the Golden Knights decided, oh, you know what, I'm going to find a different trade partner. Okay, cool. Um, it's so great. The Columbus Blue Jackets essentially trade for Jonathan Quick, and in less than a day, the Golden Knights come in and say, hey, we'll take him off your hands for this, this, and this. It's almost like it was prearranged, man. It was preordained. And the Kings, you know that they're sour about it. You know the Kings were pissed. And the scary part is Jonathan Quick isn't even the best goalie on this team. It's probably Brossoit, right? It's probably Brossoit is the most talented. Aiden Hill's been very good this year. But Jonathan Quick, he's a legend. And to have him as a backup, what a luxury, man. Taryn Rodriguez, Adam, I don't want to be this guy, but my name is spelt 1R, not 2. Nice. Dang it. Sorry, Taryn. Okay, guys, the banter. Let's go. This is Vegas sports. I don't need to read the chat. You guys misspelled names. Crazy. All good. Anyway, Las Vegas Ramblers went up 2-0 over the weekend, sweeping San Diego Wild and reverse sweeping the New Jersey Freedom. So before we get into the expansion thing, I want to give a shout out to the Las Vegas Ramblers. They're on a roll. They're one of the better teams in the NBA, the National Volleyball Association. They're the defending champs. And Taryn, you do an excellent job, man. Your interviews are second to none. You do a great job of getting hold of them coaches, those players, and I love the insight. And your questions aren't like The nice thing about your questions is they aren't the garden variety, like how do you feel your team did today, that type of stuff. I think you do a great job of creating questions that allow the coach to just have an open-ended answer, not yes they played well, that type of stuff. Larry B chimes in. I love the NHL. Eichel had an absolutely gorgeous goal in Game 3. Edmonton defender, yeah, exactly. That's the one I'm talking about, the shorthanded goal. And I alluded to that, right? That's one of the things that Golden Knights do better than most teams ever do, is the transition hockey, man. The fact that one trip led to that epic goal by Jack Eichel, but it's just something that the Golden Knights have taken advantage of since their inception in the league, really. But this year, more so than ever. And it's no surprise it's the reason why they're the number one team in the West. I just think they're a really good team. It's not like it's not like it's preordained that they're going to win it all, because I'm telling you, if they played the Florida Panthers right now in the NHL Stanley Cup Final, that'd be a dogfight, dude. Florida's coming in kicking ass, taking names. They eliminated the top seed team. They're probably going to eliminate the Maple Leafs because they put them down in a 3-0 hole. I think it's now 3-1. It's been absolutely crazy what Florida's been doing. Hats off to them. No matchup's going to be easy for the Golden Knights if they make it to the final. Not just the Western Conference final, which I hope it's Seattle Kraken. That'd be a great story. It'd be epic to see Vegas versus Seattle, Pacific Division matchup. But Vegas in the Stanley Cup final, it's anybody's game over there in the East. And I think the Vegas Florida matchup would be absolutely incredible. Two cities that aren't hockey towns, but could very well have a champion this year. That'd be so epic. That's what a great story. What a great story that would be. Back to the expansion, NHL expansion. Essentially, it goes like this. The expansion team, or the new expansion team, i.e., so let's talk about Seattle. Not this year, but last year was their inception, right? That was their inaugural year. They essentially have the ability, not only do they have the number one pick in every round, right? They have the ability to go around and essentially grab the sixth best player off of any NHL roster. Because every NHL roster, when they know there's an expansion draft coming, has the ability to put 5 no-move clauses, or basically 5 locks on players. They're 5 best players. And if Seattle wants that 6th best player, but that team doesn't want to give it away, Seattle can opt to ask for draft picks, or maybe farm system, right? Because I think the NHL does a great job with the minor leagues. There's so many different minor league teams. There's so much talent to choose from in the NHL. That's why it's so exciting every year. I think the NHL playoffs is one of the best ones in America. We just don't talk about it enough. It's overshadowed. Now, the timing's great because it doesn't have to compete with anybody. I guess the NBA is maybe a bit of a nightmare for them, but the NHL playoffs is so much more fun to watch than the NBA playoffs. It's not even close. And then we transition right into football or training camp right after that. So it's great. It all works out. But back to where we were at on the expansion. You have the ability to take either the 6th best team off of everybody's roster, which would, just in general, before the draft picks come in. And with the way draft picks work in the NHL, those guys don't normally see the NHL ice, year 1. It's usually year 2 or year 3 because they go to the minor leagues and they develop a little bit. And I think the NHL actually does a really good job of drafting younger too, so that they can develop them for a little bit in the minors. It's not like the NFL where like these rookies show up and they play it like immediately sometimes. Unless you're like an elite prospect, it's just not, and on a really bad NHL team, it's just not going to happen. So the way the expansion works, where these guys can basically take the 6th best player or accrue draft picks and just build up their stable long term, I think it's led to nothing but success. And what's going on with the Golden Knights and Seattle Kraken, say enough. Golden Knights are going into their 6th year, right? They've been very successful early, and I think it's because with all of the talent that they've amassed, with all of the assets that they amassed, they've been able to make trades, swindle their way around, free agency, all that jazz, and create a competitive team every single year. Seattle has the ability to do the exact same thing. And man, what a fan base. They've been a lot of fun. Props to Seattle, dude. Like, I said this at a football meeting last night. That goal scored to tie the series up 2-2 against the Avalanche in Seattle was absolutely incredible. Like the game winner in overtime. Seattle was rocking. The cameras were shaking. It was unbelievable. The atmosphere in NHL playoffs is second to none. Second to none. I don't think NHL playoffs gets enough love, man. I don't think they do. And I think we have some great matchups going on right now. The lopsided scoring is kind of crazy. I feel like there's been better defense in years past, but it's also kind of made things a bit more exciting. I mean, to see 5-6 goals in a playoff by one team, that's fantastic. That's so exciting to watch. Why would you stop watching that? Larry B chimes in. Actually, Adam chimes in and says, don't let Edmonton hang around. Precisely. 100% agree. The last thing you want is a super talented guy like Connor McDavid with the ability to possibly throw a wrench in your championship plans. He's that talented. I mean, he's done some scary things. Some scary things with the puck. Don't let Edmonton hang around. Larry B says Golden Knights win tomorrow night. I hope so, man. I think so too. I honestly think they have the Oilers' number. They went away from the game plan in Game 2, and I think the Oilers just kind of had some really good shorthanded goals, and they did a great job in transition that night. But the two games that I've seen from the Golden Knights, it's very consistent. They are hitting Draisaitl and Connor McDavid often. They're not allowing them to touch the puck very often. And that's been a recipe for success, obviously, because in both of those games that they won, 6 goals and 5 goals were scored. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, I think, have scored 2 goals in both those games. That's a recipe for success. That's what you want if you're the Golden Knights. And that's how you're going to have to beat Edmonton to win or get your shot, punch your ticket to the Western Conference Final in the NHL. Straight up. We're going to go to break. I want to play some drops with our teammates, especially teammates that are in the chat. Got to love it. When we get back, we're going to dive a little bit in what's happening in Vegas, because there's some stuff coming down the pike with UFC and boxing. Not to mention, we have to dive into later in the show. PFF was very critical of the Raiders draft. I mean critical. Like Sam Munson and Nick Palazzano do not like the Raiders. I don't know what it is, but they're not wrong either. Some of the things they're saying, they're not wrong. And we'll touch base on them, as well as what was CBS's grade, what was ESPN's grade. Some of the major networks, I'd like to go over those because I think they're pretty consistent, but it's just interesting when you see all of the experts around the networks, you kind of get a feel that either the networks love Dave Ziegler or they don't. They love Josh McDaniels or they don't. And that seems to be a pretty good mix. So when we get back here on the Sin City Sports Show presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports, we'll touch base on those Las Vegas Raiders.
Damn! Green team! Set, hey!
What's going on, football fans? This is me, your boy Larry B, inviting you to join myself, Colin Reynolds, Mike Pat, and John Felipe for one of the most electrifying football shows you have ever heard. 3 and Out, right here at IE Sports Radio. Recap of the week before, a preview of what's to come, and of course, 3 hardcore head-to-head prime-time face-offs each week. You don't want to miss it.
What's happening, sports fans? Are you a fan of Southern California sports? Are you looking for a show hotter than a hot summer day in California? Then look no further than the SoCal Supreme Sports Show, where I talk about all things Southern California sports. That's right, all sports teams from Southern California. From the hard-hitting tackles of the NFL, to the killer crossovers and big three-pointers of the NBA and WNBA, to the grand slams of the MLB, to the bone-chilling goals of the NHL, and to the booming kicks of the MLS, the SoCal Supreme Sports Show has it all for you. Oh, and let us not forget about the college sports as well. So join me, Taryn Rodriguez, every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
College football, and do you want to hear a college football show dedicated to all that is college football, including junior college in the CCCAA and in the NJCAA, the NAIA, and the NCAA, including Division III, Division II, Division I AA in the FCS, and Division I Single A in the FBS? Well then look no further. Join myself, Larry B., and my colleagues, Mr. H-Town Blake Henley, and Mr. Christian Espinoza, each week during the college football season for the latest in college football on 3 and Out College Edition, right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Everybody, this is Taryn Rodriguez. Are you a fan of volleyball? Are you a fan of Thunder Spikes? Then I have the show for you, Set Point, where I cover NCAA men's and women's volleyball, high school boys and girls volleyball, beach volleyball, and even professional volleyball. Catch the action every week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Ladies and sinners, IE Vegas, this is a Sin City Sports Show presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'm your host, Cale Henderson. We're back at it for another Tuesday evening edition, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on Spreaker Radio podcast. You guys can get us on Spotify. We're all about it, man. We're on the major areas. Make sure you guys get back, listen to us. If you can't hear us live, play back the show because we're always talking about all things Vegas sports. Get at us on our Twitter forums at SinCity_IESR is the show, Twitter, and then on my personal at Cale_Henderson. Again, we talk all things sports, Vegas sports. We're just all about sports. We love sports. There's nothing better. Some people watch the news. Cool. I watch sports. It's my escape from my sales job. It's my escape from work. It's my escape from, just daily stressors, man. There's nothing better than sports to do such a thing, which is part of the reason why I'm so involved in them. Love sports, and I think they make a difference for our society too. Moving on to our segment, what's happening in Vegas, or what's coming to Vegas. We'll start with the boxing side, because this is the fight segment. This is when we get to highlight some of the biggest news in Vegas. I will say this, before we get into the fights, it does seem as though we're inching closer and closer to a Major League Baseball team in Vegas. It seems as though that Vegas is getting closer and closer to maybe meeting the A's halfway with that $500 million they're missing to really get this relocation project started. I do believe at the end of the day, that $500 million is a tall task. It's a big ask. They're not the Raiders. The A's are just not even close when it comes to that market, the popularity. So I can't see Vegas giving up $500 million in public money. Now, granted, it's one of the richest cities in the world because they have 47 million tourists every single year. But I just can't see it, man. You're talking about business, okay? In the long run, the A's are just nowhere near as valuable as the Raiders. So what I think is going to happen is maybe the A's and Vegas meet middle. A's may have to put up another $250 million in funding. Maybe they do that through investors. Maybe they do that through loans, through a bank, stuff like that, because I'm sure some bank would love to sign up for that. I just don't see them getting a full $500 million to help with the relocation aspect, especially when the Major League Baseball has already waived the relocation fees. We're just waiting to find out what's going on with that 49-acre plot because it's in the middle of being purchased, and is Vegas going to donate money like they did with the Raiders? Or what Vegas could do is give the A's $250 million to help with the relocation and then maybe finance the remaining $250 million. It probably wouldn't be very, I don't know, the A's probably wouldn't like that because the A's basically gave $750 million free money in free tax dollars to the Raiders to relocate here. But again, the NFL versus Major League Baseball, not even close. Not even close in popularity, not even close to an attraction. Now, will the A's be able to bring in more business? Possibly. Maybe. But if you look at the Major League Baseball, ballparks are basically empty unless it's meaningful. Unless it's a rivalry or unless it's meaningful, ballparks are just not filling up anymore. I'm also one of those, I think there's too many damn games. I think 162 games should be shortened to 82. No BS. It would make every game worth more, mean more, every rivalry mean more. I don't know. I think that Major League Baseball should be shortened. But regardless, there's what, 81 chances, 81 home games probably that Vegas could fill up. So it's up to them at the end of the day. But from a business perspective, if I were the city of Vegas, I would look at the A's and say, hey, we'll give you $250 million, but we're going to finance the last $250 million. And Vegas should finance that. Don't let them even go to the bank if you don't have to. But the A's will probably go to a bank because that's probably in their best interest, even though the interest rates will probably be crazy on that. So regardless, the Oakland A's, or what is now known as the Oakland A's, who signed a 10-year lease and agreement to keep the Raiders from staying in the Oakland years ago, are looking to relocate to Vegas because from a business perspective, it does not seem like Oakland is interested in keeping the A's. That would be the third team that Oakland's lost in like a decade, by the way. Golden Knights, Raiders, and now it could be the A's. I mean, three staples of that community when it comes to sports. And Oakland just isn't even willing to try at this point. So sad day, but at the same time, great for Vegas. Vegas could end up getting another pro sport. And what would be crazy is that happens before an NBA team does. You think because the NBA makes a ton of money, they're a big attraction. There's a bunch of arenas around Vegas. It would probably I mean, an NBA team could probably share the T-Mobile Arena with the Aces if they really wanted to. But I digress. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm really surprised that a Major League Baseball team is likely before an NBA team is likely in Vegas anyway. But hey, we've seen crazier things. Boxing in Vegas is as always underway. Premier Boxing Champions. We got we got a May 13 matchup between Puello and Romero. Top ranked boxing. Haney versus Lomachenko. I am really excited. I love Lomachenko as a fighter. I think he's a nasty man. I love the way he fights. I have no. I mean, it's always fun. Would I pay for it? No, probably not. UFC 290. Let's just go ahead and go over the UFC. So UFC Fight Night, Dern vs. Hill. That'll be May 20th in Las Vegas. That'll be at the UFC Event Center, the Apex Center. Mackenzie Dern is taking on Angela Hill. Main event. I'm guessing that this could end up being a number one contenders match. Honestly, it's the main event. This could be a number one contenders match for the women's strawweight title. And strawweight means the 115-pound class. I don't know, man. That could very well be a number one contenders match because they need more love in the women's division, especially since Ronda Rousey left and Nunez is getting longer in the tooth. They really need to find some stars, and I hope that going to a lighter division where things are faster. It's like that with the men, right? The 130-pound division is crazy. Like watching those guys fly around is nuts. Their punches are much faster, kicks, everything. Their wrestling is very impressive at the lower levels. We got to see that from the women too. And I think the UFC would be in UFC's best interest to continue to push the women's division, especially if you can have the bantamweight and the strawweight and make those more popular and find contenders and stars and continue to market them, because I think there's a large pool of young women and honestly just in general, like males love hot UFC fighters. It is what it is. Like Ronda was pretty hot in her day. I mean, she was just literally everyone loved her. They were drooling over her. I don't know, Misha Tate, you guys know what I'm saying. But Ronda was pretty hot. She wasn't bad. So it's just there's so much to sell in the women's division. I'd love to see more of that from the UFC. Looking at more events here in Las Vegas. So on June 3rd, we'll have Cara France versus Albazi. That'll be for the flyweight division. Again, I think we're talking about a 24-10 Kai Cara France taking on Amir Albazi, who's 16-1. The age difference is only a year, but we're looking at flyweight matchups that could end up being number one contenders matches down the road. Why not? Why not? Like, I just want to see good fights. That's what I'm big on, man. I just want to see good fights. And who wouldn't? But I can tell you guys, the lighter divisions are far more fun to watch. They're so fast. I'll say so I'll put it in order like this as far as interest in divisions. I'm a big fan of the middleweight. I think the middleweight's a ton of fun. Light heavyweight is very impressive. Heavyweights, I think it depends on who's fighting, right? Because you have those athletic heavyweights, and then you have those real dudes that are real heavy. Like the Brock Lesnar's of the world, they were very entertaining because someone to be that big and that powerful, that fast, that explosive, but he was an unbelievable national championship wrestler at Minnesota. I'm not as big of a fan as the heavyweight, but the light heavyweight, the middleweight, those are always fun. The welterweights, that's the 171, I believe. And sometimes you get down to them flyweights or them bantamweights. So much fun to watch. But I can tell you guys right now, UFC is getting more and more interesting. The wrestler is not as dominant as it used to be. It felt like if you were a wrestler and you were a UFC fighter, I think that you had an advantage in most cases. Like the Tyron Woodleys of the world were just tactically savvy, man. They didn't have issues because usually who they fought wasn't a very good wrestler. Now we're seeing a really good mix of strikers / jiu-jitsu black belts, and I think it's making the sport more interesting. Dana White and whatever, I can't remember the name of the company that purchased UFC and recently WWE, but like they're doing a great job of marketing their brands, and they're just making more and more money every year, which is nuts. During COVID, these guys made money. During COVID, they bought an island, built an island, or built a facility to have fights, and they still made money. Employees were not laid off. That's one thing Dana White says on a consistent basis. Employees were not laid off. It was just very impressive the way the UFC ran their business, and it's been impressive ever since. I think they've done a great job. In the middle of COVID, there was a freaking merger, man. The UFC was bought. Dana White still has a ton of power, and he still puts together a ton of fights. There's the pay discrepancy, and then Dana White saying that boxing's dying, and it's just not as popular as it used to be, and it's true. But I think UFC has made that tough. It is what it is. But yeah, June 3rd, UFC Apex flyweight main event. We'll have Kara France and Albazi going at it. I'm sure I'm telling you, implications of possibly a number one contender. Like if one of these guys wins handily, it gives them an opportunity to fight for the flyweight title, and that's what you want to see for the UFC. So we have Kara France, Albazi, Nunez. That one will be in Vancouver, unfortunately. That'll be June 10th, but Nunez is a notable fighter. One of the best women's, maybe one of the best fighters of all time, but one of the best women's fighters for sure. One of the few that just rocked Ronda Rousey and had no problem doing it. She lost her title, won it back. Now she's fighting a young lady by the name of Aldana. Got a bit of a size advantage on her. Should be interesting to see how that goes. June 17th, Apex Arena, Vittori versus Kanye. That dude's so French, it's not even funny. We have June 24th, UFC Fight Night. That one will be in Jacksonville. Let's focus on Vegas here. Strickland and Magomedov. The Magomedov family is nuts. This is a middleweight fight. So Sean Strickland right now is listed at 204. I believe he has to cut to 185 to fight middleweight. That's a big cut, and he doesn't look like a guy that has a lot to cut. So that should be very interesting. Sean Strickland's 26-5. He's 32 years old, 76-inch reach, fighting against Abbas Magomedov, one of the Magomedov brothers. That man is 25-4-1. He's at 186 pounds, 32, 78-inch reach. This should be a pretty nasty fight. But the Magomedovs, man, I don't know what it is about. Those guys can wrestle. They're just elite. I mean, yeah, that should be an interesting fight, but I think Magomedov probably wins either by decision or submission. UFC 290, wanted to touch base on that one because we talked about John Jones and Stipe Miocic in that fight. It seems as though that is going to be pushed out to the fall. So they're still looking for that main event card, a big one in July, because that's July 8th or after July 4th or the new year, or you guys get what I'm saying. Independence Day, that tends to be one of their more important battles or one of their more important events. So UFC 290, I think they're trying to make it a big one. But yeah, John Jones and Miocic likely not going to happen now. I'm sure it's because of a negotiation thing. Miocic has been out for a little bit. He might need a little bit more time to get ready. John Jones might need a little bit more time to get ready because I know he was fighting some injuries, which is hence all the pool workouts he had to do before the last fight against Cyril Gane, which he defeated him handily, obviously. So I'd love to see that in the fall. I think that's going to be an amazing fight. Dude, it wouldn't surprise me if Miocic wins. Miocic is a bad man, but John Jones is the greatest we've ever seen. There's just no way around it. John Jones is the greatest we've ever seen in a UFC octagon, and I'm hard pressed. If I dare anybody argue with me on that. The only person I think is close, obviously John Jones would wax him, but the only person I could think is close, maybe Anderson Silva, Mighty Mouse, but I'm a big George St. Pierre guy. I thought George St. Pierre did it all the right way. I thought he was a great dude. He had a ton of title defenses. I think he had won like 18 fights in the UFC. George St. Pierre was nuts in his prime, and his story is fantastic. So I would put George St. Pierre in the Mount Rushmore for sure, but John Jones is the head of that table, man. I mean, he's the dude, and I can't wait for his next fight. We'll keep you guys up to date because I'm sure that'll be in Vegas. John is a Vegas resident, and I think he performs his best fights in Vegas, so we'll definitely keep you guys in touch with that one. Moving on to the Raiders. Nick Pazzolano and Sam Munson from PFF were pretty brutal about the Raiders. Before I get into those guys, I'll talk about it like this. I'll say it like this. CBS Sports gave the Raiders, I believe it was a B plus. I'm pretty positive it's B plus. Let's take a look here. Raiders draft grades. Yep, B plus was the consensus. This was by Chris Trapasso. I mean, CBS loved their draft. They're one of the only ones that love the draft. They loved the Michael Mayer pick. Obviously, he had great value. He was one of the best tight ends in the draft this year. Picked in the second round. I mean, there were some that thought he was the best. I personally thought Dalton Kincaid was a better pass catcher, but Michael Mayer was also like at Notre Dame. He had nobody else around him. Let's be real. And he was doubled almost every play. Like colleges were doubling a tight end. He was that effective. He's that scary good. That's not going to happen in the NFL when you have Devontae Adams on your team, when you have Jacoby Myers on your team, when you have Philip Dorsett. Michael Mayer is going to catch a ton of balls in his rookie year. I mean, he's probably going to go for like 800 yards and maybe 6 touchdowns, which would be an excellent rookie year for a tight end, by the way. Wouldn't surprise me if that happens, even with Austin Hooper on the team. Michael Mayer was a steal for the Raiders at pick 35 in the second round because he did have a first-round grade, and he was arguably the best tight end in this draft. To me, Dalton Kincaid was the guy, but Michael Mayer is definitely, and he's an excellent blocker, man. He's a great blocker. He's like a sixth lineman, and that's perfect for this system. So makes all the sense in the world to me. But that was their best draft pick. Unfortunately, Tyree Wilson, I'm telling you, I think he was a reach. I think Byron Young in the third round was a reach. I think Trey Tucker in the third round was a reach. They didn't make a lot of sense. And that's kind of what PFF alludes to, but CBS loved it. They gave the Raiders a B plus draft grade. ESPN gave them a B minus. I gave them a B minus last week. There was a solid B at NBC Sports. PFF, on the other hand, they didn't give a letter grade. They basically said, and I'll put it to you like this: they poo-pooed on CBS's grade, they poo-pooed on ESPN's grade, and they got a B minus from PFF as a consensus, but Sam Munson and Nick Pazzolano were very critical of the Raiders, and it's because of these reasons. And it doesn't matter who's in charge. The Raiders have had a tendency to reach for players. The last 20 years. Look at the last 20 years of drafts. Like Khalil Mack was a hit. Amari Cooper, obviously a hit, right? Those were great picks. But let's talk about the Carl Josephs of the world. Let's talk about the Clea Farrells of the world. John Abrams of the world. Alex Leatherwood. Those are just some to highlight the last 4 or 5 years. But it's been happening for 20. It's why the team's so bad. They have a tendency to reach. For example, Tyree Wilson was ranked, his PFF pass rush grade was in the 70s. That put him near 100th as far as ranked as far as the pass rushing grade is concerned. So by all means, he shouldn't have been a top 10 pick. Now, the consensus among analysts out there is that Tyree Wilson is a guy with upside, but that's the problem. The Raiders have been drafting traits. Traits are not a bad thing to draft for. Freakish athletes are not a bad thing to draft. But I feel like only teams that know how to develop talent, teach the skills, take those traits to the next level or 3 extra levels, depending on where they're at in their development, those are the teams that are allowed to do that. The New Englands of the world, the Chiefs of the world, who we all know have great coaching staffs and can develop. The Titans of the world. Man, Mike Vrabel is an excellent coach. I think he's underrated, honestly. It's those teams that I have no problem reach on traits because they know how to coach them up. The Baltimores of the world. You guys get where I'm going with this. The Raiders are not one of those teams. They've been a bad team for 20 years. They've had 2 playoff appearances in 20 years. They don't have room for error. So yes, this draft is getting a lot of flack. Now, B is solid, but I think B is solid this year because of what we've seen in the last 5 years. Truly, I think the Raiders have drafted so bad that a B was good this year, even with a bunch of reaches in the third round. I think Jacorian Bennett in the fourth was fantastic. Don't get me wrong. But Trey Tucker and Byron Young, none of those guys were in the top 100 players. Neither one of those two were in the top 100. Byron Young out of Tennessee was better than Byron Young out of Alabama. Again, it's about upside. It's about traits. And that's what the Raiders have been drafting. And I'm not against it if they truly have faith in their coaching ability, but we saw what happened last year, right? How does a head coach who's 17-28 still have faith, right? How do people still have faith in a coach that's 17-28 without Bill Belichick, without Tom Brady? He chased off a quarterback, blamed a franchise quarterback that did honestly nothing wrong. Was he perfect? No. Was he the reason the Raiders were really bad? No. Was he a solution to how bad the Raiders were? Not necessarily, but the guy did way more good for the Raiders than he did bad, and this coaching staff chased him off. Now they're hoping that Jimmy G, and granted, the Raiders have weapons, man, but that offensive line is still trash. The defense is still bad, and they barely addressed anything. So I get where CBS is coming from. I see the upside in some of these picks. I don't quite agree with it. I gave him a B-. I think Tyree Wilson was a reach. I think they just loved his tape. I think they love his intangibles. Here's my problem. We said this last week. We touched base on this last week. You had Jalen Carter available at 7. Now, from reports out there, it sounded like Paris Johnson Jr. was their guy. If Paris Johnson Jr. wouldn't have been selected at 6 by the Lions, the Raiders were going to grab him. That would have been great because they need a tackle. Which also means there's a possibility, I don't know, Colton Miller's gone soon. Them Patriots guys love them rookie contracts with the offensive line. They love to develop those guys. I'm just saying. There's a possibility we might not see Colton Miller. Depends on how the season goes. If the Raiders can move him at the trade deadline and they're losing or they don't have a chance to make the playoffs, we're going to see some guys moved. I'm surprised Devontae Adams hasn't asked for a trade already. Seriously. But maybe he just has faith. It was his childhood team. I don't know. I'm just being realistic with you guys. I gave them a B-. Sam Munson, Nick Pazzolano, crapped on these guys. So point 1 was the Raiders reach. They always reach. It's bad. And they have a history of doing it no matter who's in charge, right? 2, they tend to draft on traits. Come on, man. Traits aren't everything. Watch the film. The grading scales are out there. In my belief that if you're building a team, especially in the NFL, you have to hit on your first 3 picks, whether that's round 1, 2, 3, whether that's round, multiple picks in round 1 or multiple picks in round 2. Either way, you have to hit on your first 3 picks. Those guys have to be able to come in and contribute day 1. I firmly believe that. Everything else is traits. Everything else is like upside. Because at that point, those are glorified special teams guys. Those are guys that you believe that can fill depth and make an impact when they've developed a bit more. But your first 3 picks have to be hits, man. Tyree Wilson, I don't know if he's going to be a hit. You cannot tell me that a guy who played for Texas Tech is all of a sudden going to show up and be an all-pro. Plus, they drafted a defensive end at number 7 who's probably going to back up Chandler Jones, who is on the decline in his career, which is fine. It gives them a year to develop him and make him the premier guy next year next to Max Crosby or across from Max Crosby. But the reality is he's got a year to develop essentially and then maybe be a situational pass rusher this year. I personally think they drafted him because they see a guy that could really help collapse the pocket. He's long. He might be able to corral Patrick Mahomes. And this was said on that podcast for PFF. Like, I totally agree with them. Totally agree with them. But it was a reach nonetheless because Jalen Carter, the best player in this draft, was available. Yes, I think Jalen Carter's in a better situation. I think Jalen Carter goes to the Eagles and he takes it more seriously because there's a bunch of veterans there and they're trying to win. Does this staff struggle with Jalen Carter and his discipline issues? Possibly. Possibly. Does Jalen Carter play as well for the Raiders as he does for the Eagles? I doubt it, man. I really doubt it because there just isn't as much talent. Jalen Carter can get plugged into a 3 technique, a 1 technique on the Eagles. And he's got Jordan Davis. He's got Hassan Reddick. He's got now a Nolan Smith to rush around him. They are so stacked in Philly that They can't double team a dominant guy. They can't just double team one guy. Jalen Carter's going to eat, man. He's going to produce early. As a Raider, he's not going to do that. But he would be a day one starter, and he probably would be a contributor for this team. Whereas Wilson, he's likely going to ride the bench for a couple weeks until he gets warmed up or Chandler Jones just really struggles. Or maybe injury, which I would never wish on that guy. It's the reality of the fact that the Raiders have made a habit of drafting way ahead of where people are at. You have so many experts out there grading these dudes. You have so many experts out there saying Tyree Wilson's, they're not that high on him. But for some reason, the Raiders are just smarter than everybody else. I don't know. They did that with Leatherwood. They did that with Abrams. They did that with Cleve Farrell. I mean, we can go down the list, man. Jamarcus Russell, this wasn't this regime, but you guys get what I'm saying. It's the fact of the matter, man. And it's been a habitual thing. It's been a habitual thing for the Raiders. They've got to break this cycle. They've got to break this cycle of reaching on players. Hit your first 3 draft picks, draft for upside and steals, trade up for guys that you really want, that you just fallen in love with by watching film, that you think you can develop 4 through 7. Because those guys are either going to be high impact guys that turn out and you just get great value out of that pick, or they're going to be special teams guys for a few years before you move on from them. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. You just can't miss on your first 3 guys because draft picks are so different in the NFL than what they are in every other league. And I just think the Raiders have done a poor job of taking advantage of that. That's the reality. So I actually agree with PFF. I understand why they're not agreeing with the B grade. I understand why, to their point, why they gave the Raiders, like Michael Mayer was a great pick, and I think everybody agrees with that. They got a first-round talent in the second round. Everyone else, it's suspect. Ja'Cory Bennett, on the other hand, though, like getting him in the 4th round as a corner, he was probably like the 3rd best slot corner in this draft, and he's not going to have to come in and be a dude right away because you have Nate Hobbs, and I think the Raiders really believe in their cornerback room. I don't know why. It's just nice to see that the Raiders maybe address some defensive needs, but there's still a ton of depth that needs to be made on the defensive line. And that offensive line is still not good. I don't care what anybody says. That offensive line is trash. So they got a top 10 grade PFF in the run game, but their pass blocking grade was around in the 20s. So they were right around the middle. And it still wasn't even that good because when you look at Josh Jacobs' average yards per contact, it was like half a yard up the line of scrimmage. That's horrible. That means the line was getting no push, and Josh Jacobs just had 1,600 yards after contact. That's incredible to me. Guy he went for 2,000 yards this year, total. 16 of them were after contact. 1,600 of them were after contact. I don't know, man. I think the Raiders are playing for 3rd place, and I hate to say that because I want them to win really bad. I could be wrong because they have elite talent at some key positions. Max Crosby, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, they have elite talent at key positions. Will it translate to W's this year? Will there be more losses with a 2-score lead? There were 7 to be exact last year. That's a coaching issue. And that's my biggest takeaway. I love that they're going after guys with traits. I just don't like the way that they don't develop. And that comes from a coaching perspective. So, you guys know what it is. This is the Sin City Sports Show presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'm your host, Cale Henderson. Get at us on our Twitter forums at SinCity_IESR, at Cale_Henderson, where we talk all things Vegas sports in general. Tune in 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time here on Spreaker or Spotify. And as always, folks, love, peace, and hair grease.